Vikings ate raw meat straight from the kill and drank blood to stay warm. Wrong. Vikings buried fermented shark in the ground for months and ate it when it smelled like ammonia and death. That's worse. But it's true, and we're going to explain why. You think you know how Vikings survived winter. You don't. Everything you believe is either Hollywood bullshit or misunderstood history. For the next 30 minutes, we're destroying 10 myths about Viking winter survival using archaeology, experiments, and chemistry. Watch until the end, because myth number 10 will completely change how you think about cold weather survival. Scientists tested it. The data is brutal. Vikings were huge, muscular warriors who didn't feel cold. The movies show 7-foot giants with arms like tree trunks. Archaeological evidence shows something different. Average Viking male height, 5'7" to 5'9". That's 170 to 175 centimeters. Tall for the era, not giants. Modern Norwegians are taller than Vikings were. Skeletal analysis from hundreds of Viking graves shows this consistently. The Repton Viking mass burial in England, the Gokstad ship burial in Norway, the Birka cemetery in Sweden, all show the same pattern. Medium height by modern standards, tall for medieval times. Body mass? Bone thickness analysis suggests average weight around 70 to 80 kilograms for men. That's 150 to 175 pounds. Lean, not bodybuilder massive. Because maintaining huge muscle mass requires enormous calorie intake, and Vikings couldn't afford to eat enough to support modern bodybuilder physiques. Bone chemistry tells us more. Isotope analysis of Viking bones shows dietary patterns. Carbon and nitrogen isotopes reveal protein sources. The ratio of marine protein versus terrestrial protein. What this shows: Vikings ate a lot of fish. Cod, herring, salmon. Fish is lean protein. You can't build massive muscle on fish alone. Did they feel cold? Absolutely. Arabic diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan met Vikings in 922 CE. He described them as wearing multiple layers. He noted they changed clothes frequently to stay clean and dry. You don't do that if you're impervious to cold. You do that because you're managing cold as a constant threat. Viking graves contain textile remains. Analysis shows they wore linen undergarments, wool middle layers, and fur or leather outer layers. 3-layer system. Modern outdoor clothing still uses this principle. Base layer wicks moisture. Middle layer insulates. Outer layer blocks wind. The myth of cold-immune Vikings comes from saga descriptions of berserkers, warriors who supposedly fought in minimal clothing. But saga evidence is unreliable, written centuries after events, probably exaggerated. Archaeological evidence shows everyone wore heavy layered clothing in winter. Vikings ate mostly meat, like medieval carnivore diet. Hollywood Vikings feast on roasted meat, whole pigs on spits, haunches of venison. Reality is different. Archaeological evidence from garbage pits, called middens, tells the true story. Analysis of Viking middens at Birka in Sweden, Hedeby in Denmark, and York in England shows consistent patterns. Fish bones dominate. Cod, herring, mackerel. Shell fragments from oysters and mussels. Some animal bones, but not as many as you'd expect from movie depictions. Plant remains tell more. Seeds from barley, rye, oats. These grains formed the base of Viking diet. Porridge, bread, beer. Grains provided bulk calories. Archaeological excavations at Oseberg in Norway found barley seeds preserved in burial goods. At Jorvik in York, analysis of Viking cesspits found high concentration of grain remains. Modern nutritional analysis reconstructed Viking diet. Herstwick Research Organization calculated calorie requirements for Viking activities. Farming with hand tools, 800 calories per hour. Rowing, 600 calories per hour. Wood chopping, 700 calories per hour. Daily requirement, minimum 3,000 calories, possibly up to 10,000 calories on heavy work days. To get 10,000 calories from meat alone requires approximately 3 kilograms of meat daily. That's 6 pounds per person every day. Impossible to sustain. Livestock were too valuable. Cows provided milk year-round. You don't slaughter the milk source for one meal. Archaeological evidence shows cows were slaughtered only after they stopped producing milk. Old cows. Tough meat. Most meat came from hunting. Wild boar, deer, elk, seabirds, seals, whales when they beached. But hunting is unreliable. Can't depend on it for daily calories. Grains are reliable. Plant them in spring, harvest in autumn, process and store. 1 hectare of barley yields approximately 2,500 kilograms of grain. That's over 8 million calories, enough to feed a family through winter. Meat is supplement. Grains are foundation. Danish study in 2014 analyzed a Viking-inspired diet versus modern Western diet. The Viking-style diet, high in fish, whole grains, root vegetables, berries. Result? Reduced cholesterol, improved blood sugar, weight loss. Not because of meat, because of balanced whole foods and fish. The carnivore myth damages understanding of real Viking survival. They succeeded because they were smart agricultural planners, not because they ate nothing but meat. Vikings drank alcohol constantly to stay warm. Mead halls in movies flow with endless alcohol. Vikings perpetually drunk. This is wrong on multiple levels. First, alcohol doesn't warm you. It creates illusion of warmth while actually causing heat loss. Alcohol causes vasodilation. Blood vessels near skin surface expand. You feel warm because hot blood reaches skin. But that means you're losing heat faster. Your core temperature drops. Alcohol in cold weather increases hypothermia risk. Every survival manual states this. Did Vikings know this? Probably not scientifically, but they knew from experience. Saga accounts describe people dying of exposure after drinking. Fostbrødre Saga tells of men who drank heavily before traveling in snow. They died. The saga treats this as obvious consequence of stupidity. How much did Vikings actually drink? Ale was daily beverage, but Viking ale was weak, approximately 2 to 3% alcohol. Modern beer is 4 to 6%. Viking ale was closer to sessionable small beer. You could drink it all day without getting drunk. Why drink ale? Water safety. Medieval water sources carried disease. Brewing process kills pathogens. Boiling the water. Fermentation produces alcohol, which inhibits bacterial growth. Small beer was safer than water. Mead was different. Mead is honey wine, 8 to 15% alcohol. Strong. Archaeological evidence shows mead production, residue analysis from drinking vessels. But mead was for celebrations, feasts, important events, not daily consumption. Calorie content matters. 1 liter of ale provides approximately 400 calories. That's useful nutrition, not just intoxication. Vikings drank ale as liquid food, like drinking bread. The alcohol content was incidental to caloric benefit.
Saga accounts of great drinking feasts? Probably accurate. But those were special occasions, Yule celebrations, wedding feasts, funeral observances, not typical winter survival routine. Daily routine was work, small beer with meals, early sleep to conserve fire. The constant drinking myth comes from saga focus on dramatic events. Sagas describe feasts because feasts are interesting. They don't describe boring Tuesday when everyone ate porridge and went to bed early. But boring Tuesdays were 95% of Viking winter. Vikings loved cold weather and thrived in winter. No, Vikings feared winter. Winter killed more Vikings than all the battles combined. Archaeological evidence is clear. Winter was survival challenge, not lifestyle preference. Icelandic sagas describe winter as dangerous time. Grettis saga tells of people dying from exposure. Eyrbyggja saga describes difficult winters when food ran short. People starved. These aren't adventure stories. They're cautionary tales about winter's danger. Analysis of Viking graves shows seasonal mortality patterns. More deaths in winter and early spring, particularly children and elderly. Not from battle, from malnutrition, disease, cold exposure. Winter was killing season. Settlement patterns show Viking winter fear. In Iceland and Greenland, Vikings abandoned more marginal settlements after harsh winters. Archaeological excavation of the Greenland Norse colonies shows they died out. Climate got colder. Growing seasons shortened. They couldn't produce enough food. Eventually, everyone died or left. The Norse Greenland colony lasted from 985 CE to approximately 1450 CE. Then it vanished. Why? Climate change. The medieval warm period ended. Little Ice Age began. Winters got worse. Growing season decreased. They starved. Archaeological analysis of the last inhabitants shows malnutrition. Bone analysis reveals protein deficiency. They were eating their dogs. Sealskin clothing shows they were desperate. They abandoned traditional farming, tried living like Inuit. Failed. All died. If Vikings thrived in cold, the Greenland colony would have succeeded. It didn't. Cold killed them. This is the clearest evidence that Vikings didn't have magical cold resistance. They had techniques that worked in specific conditions. When conditions exceeded those parameters, they died. Even in mainland Scandinavia, winter remained dangerous. Viking law codes from Iceland and Norway contain extensive regulations about winter hospitality. If traveler arrives seeking shelter, you must take them in. Refusing hospitality in winter was crime, because refusing meant the traveler would die. This legal requirement reveals the truth. Winter was so dangerous that society enforced sharing of resources. If Vikings loved winter, these laws wouldn't exist. The laws exist because winter killed people who weren't prepared or protected. Viking houses were primitive and barely functional. Movies show Vikings living in crude huts, dirt floors, smoke-filled interiors, minimal comfort. Archaeological evidence shows sophisticated thermal engineering. The longhouse at Borg in Lofoten, Norway, measured 83 meters long. That's 272 feet. Massive structure. Not primitive. Carefully designed. Excavation revealed post holes, wall remnants, floor levels. Analysis shows multi-layer construction. Walls, 40-centimeter oak logs fitted with precision joints. Gaps caulked with moss. Moss doesn't rot. When wet, it swells, making joints tighter. Exterior coating of clay mixed with straw and manure. This creates thermal mass and wind barrier. Roof. Wooden planks, then birch bark waterproofing, then thick moss layer, then turf with living grass. Total thickness, 50 centimeters. Modern analysis shows this provides R value of 25 to 30. That's better than many modern walls. Floor. Packed earth mixed with clay, covered with straw. Underneath, a layer of dry leaves and moss. This prevents cold from ground penetrating upward. Simple. Effective. Ventilation. Small openings at different wall heights. Cold air enters low. Warm air exits high. Natural convection creates circulation. No mechanical systems, just physics. Modern reconstruction experiment in Denmark, 2011 to 2012. 2 reconstructed Viking houses inhabited for 15 weeks in winter. Temperature measurements. Interior average 17.5 degrees Celsius in one house, 15 degrees in the other. Outside average, 10 degrees lower. The houses maintained 10-degree temperature differential without constant fire. Air exchange rate, 10 to 15 changes per hour. By modern standards, very leaky. But this prevented carbon monoxide buildup. The primitive design was actually optimized for safety. Modern airtight houses need mechanical ventilation. Viking houses used passive design. Thermal mass. The stones around the hearth absorbed heat during day, released it slowly at night. The thick log walls did the same. Heat storage through mass. This is advanced thermal engineering. We rediscovered this principle in the 1970s passive solar movement. Vikings used it for 1,000 years. The myth of primitive houses damages understanding of Viking engineering intelligence. These structures required deep knowledge of materials, thermal dynamics, and structural integrity. Nothing primitive about it. Vikings fought nature to survive winter. Western mindset sees nature as enemy to conquer. This colors interpretation of Viking survival. But Vikings didn't fight nature. They worked with natural systems. Example, livestock integration. 4 cows generate 4,000 watts of heat continuously. That's more than 3 space heaters. Vikings kept cows in an adjoining section of longhouse. The partition allowed heat transfer while separating living spaces. This isn't fighting nature. It's using animal thermal output as engineering component. Cows need shelter anyway. Humans need heat anyway. Combine them. Solve both problems. That's cooperation, not conquest. Example, food preservation. Vikings didn't try to keep fresh meat fresh. Impossible without refrigeration. Instead, they transformed meat into different products through controlled decomposition. Fermented shark, hakarl. Shark meat is toxic when fresh. Contains high urea and trimethylamine oxide. Eating fresh shark causes illness. Viking solution? Bury shark in sand for 6 to 12 weeks. Pressure from sand squeezes out fluids. Bacterial fermentation breaks down toxins. Result? Edible protein that doesn't spoil. Modern analysis shows fermented shark is safe. The process neutralizes toxins. It also creates a product that doesn't require refrigeration. Shelf stable for months. Vikings didn't fight shark toxicity. They used bacterial action to solve the problem. Example, grain storage. Barley and rye can be stored dry for years without spoiling. Vikings built storage sheds with raised floors. Air circulates underneath. Prevents moisture accumulation. Prevents mold. The grain stores itself. Vikings just provided conditions. Example, natural antifreeze. Vikings discovered some springs don't freeze even at -20. These springs flow from deep underground. Water temperature stays above freezing. Vikings built settlements near these springs. Guaranteed water access all winter. They didn't fight frozen water. They found water that doesn't freeze. The fighting nature myth reflects modern mentality, not Viking reality. Modern humans use enormous energy to override natural conditions. Heating, air conditioning, artificial light. Vikings observed natural patterns and inserted themselves into those patterns. Much more efficient. Viking diet was terrible for health. Intestinal parasites, no vegetables, rotten fermented food. Sounds like health disaster. Archaeological evidence shows opposite. Skeletal analysis from Viking Age sites shows surprisingly good health. Analysis of bones from Skeljastaðir in Iceland, 11th, 12th century remains. Little evidence of nutritional deficiency diseases. Bone density, normal. Height, normal for population. They weren't malnourished. Viking graves show people living into 60s and 70s. Not everyone died at 30. The average lifespan 35 years myth comes from including infant mortality. High infant death rate drags average down. But if you survived childhood, you had decent chance of long life. Archaeological evidence shows healed fractures, arthritis, dental wear consistent with old age. People survived decades. Can't do that on terrible diet. What did they eat? Isotope analysis of bones reveals long-term dietary patterns. Carbon-13 and nitrogen-15 ratios show protein sources. Studies show high marine protein consumption, fish, shellfish, seals. This provides omega-3 fatty acids. Modern research shows omega-3s support heart and brain health. Vikings got these without knowing why they worked. Significant terrestrial protein. Dairy primarily, meat occasionally. Dairy provides calcium, protein, fats. Modern analysis of skyr, Icelandic fermented milk product. High protein, probiotic bacteria, easily digestible. Nutritionally excellent. Grain-based calories. Barley, rye, oats. These provide B vitamins, fiber, steady energy. Modern analysis of traditional Viking diet shows 30% calories from grains. That's not low carb. That's balanced macronutrients. Seasonal fruits and vegetables. Seeds found at archaeological sites. Cabbage, onions, leeks, peas, beans, apples, berries. These provide vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. Modern nutritional reconstruction. A Hurstwick analysis calculated nutrient intake from authentic Viking diet. Result? All essential vitamins and minerals present in adequate amounts. Assuming access to variety of foods, no deficiencies predicted. Yes, they had intestinal parasites. Analysis of Viking latrine in York showed parasite eggs. But parasites aren't fatal. They're inconvenient. And every medieval population had them, not specific to Vikings. Fermented foods sound disgusting, but are nutritionally beneficial. Fermentation produces probiotics, beneficial bacteria. Modern research shows fermented foods support gut health. Vikings ate fermented fish, fermented dairy, pickled vegetables. Accidentally created probiotic-rich diet. The health myth comes from applying modern food safety standards retroactively. Yes, by modern standards, Viking food handling was risky, but their immune systems adapted, and the nutritional foundation was solid. Vikings stayed indoors all winter, cabin fever, isolation, waiting for spring. Wrong. Vikings remained active all winter. Archaeological evidence and saga accounts both confirm this. Ski fragments found at multiple Norwegian sites, dating from Viking age. These aren't ceremonial objects, they're functional skis with wear patterns. People use them regularly. Saga accounts describe winter travel. Egil's saga describes people skiing between farms, traveling for visits, conducting business. Winter wasn't hibernation period. It was different travel season. Ice skating evidence. Bone skates found at Birka, Sweden, Jorvik, England, multiple Scandinavian sites. These are animal bones shaped for skating, holes drilled for bindings. Wear patterns show extensive use. How do bone skates work? Tie them to boots. Use a stick for propulsion. Glide across frozen lakes and rivers. In places where summer travel requires boats or muddy overland routes, winter ice creates highways. Frozen fjords, frozen lakes, easier travel than summer in some cases. Saga accounts confirm ice use for transportation. Brennu Njal's saga describes people crossing frozen lakes, faster than walking around. Vikings adapted transportation methods to seasonal conditions. Winter hunting. Archaeological evidence from Middens shows winter hunting activity. Seal bones from winter hunts. Seals are easier to hunt in winter when they come onto ice. Evidence of elk and deer hunting in winter. Snow makes tracking easier. Winter hunting provided fresh protein when stored food got monotonous. Ice fishing. References in sagas to winter fishing. Cutting holes in ice. Vikings living near coast continued fishing all winter. Different techniques than summer, but still viable. Winter warfare. Multiple saga accounts of winter raids. Harder to execute, but sometimes strategic. Frozen rivers allow army movement. Snow covers your approach. Some Viking raids specifically targeted winter because defenders didn't expect it. Trade continued in winter, not overseas voyages, but regional trade, winter markets,
ice roads connecting communities. Trade goods moved all year. The myth of winter isolation reflects modern behavior, not Viking reality. Modern people avoid winter travel. Vikings couldn't afford to. The economy couldn't stop for 5 months. Life continued. Viking survival techniques are useless today. Climate change, modern technology, different world. Viking techniques irrelevant, right? Wrong. Some Viking survival principles are being rediscovered by modern survivalists and architects. Passive house design. Modern energy-efficient construction uses Viking principles: thick insulation, thermal mass, natural ventilation, passive solar orientation. The passive house standard developed in Germany in 1990s. Vikings used these concepts in 900s. Modern passive houses aim for minimal heating requirements, thick walls, triple glazed windows, careful air sealing, heat recovery ventilation. The goal? Maintain comfort using minimal external energy. Vikings achieved similar result using available materials. Fermented food trend. Modern nutrition research validates Viking fermentation. Probiotics for gut health. Fermented foods are now trendy. Kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut. Vikings were eating fermented herring, fermented shark, fermented milk. Same principle, different ingredients. High-fat diet rediscovery. Modern research on ketogenic diets and metabolic flexibility. Turns out fat isn't evil. Vikings knew this experientially. Modern analysis of Viking diet shows 35 to 40% of calories from fat, similar to modern high-performance diets. Seasonal eating. Modern locavore movement rediscovering Viking practice. Eat what grows locally and seasonally. Preserve surplus for lean times. Vikings did this by necessity. Modern people do it by choice. But the practice is identical. Underground food storage. Modern root cellars are Viking technology. Stable, cool temperature. No electricity required. Using Earth's thermal mass for preservation. Modern homesteaders build root cellars. Viking technology. 21st century application. Layered clothing system. Modern outdoor clothing uses Viking principle. Base layer, insulation layer, shell layer. Materials changed. Principle didn't. Vikings used linen, wool, fur. Modern gear uses synthetics. Same 3-layer concept. Community resilience. Viking survival depended on community cooperation, shared resources, mutual aid. Modern resilience planning rediscovering this. Community emergency preparedness, resource sharing, neighborly support. These aren't new ideas. They're Viking ideas. Climate adaptation. As modern climate becomes more extreme, Viking adaptability becomes relevant. They lived through medieval warm period into Little Ice Age. They adapted. Their techniques for responding to changing conditions have value. The useless myth reflects modern arrogance. We're advanced. They were primitive. But energy efficiency, nutrition, community structures? Vikings did these well. We can learn. The secret to Viking winter survival was toughness. No, the secret was engineering, thermal management, food science, community organization, not personal toughness. Individual toughness is worthless if your house design is bad. Tough person in poorly insulated house
Dies, same as weak person. The structure determines survival, not attitude. Individual toughness is worthless if your food preservation fails. You can't willpower your way through starvation. The technique determines survival, not mindset. Individual toughness is worthless if you're isolated. One person alone in winter dies. Community of average people sharing resources survives. The system determines outcome, not individual attribute. Vikings succeeded through systematic approach. Site selection. Choose location that works with thermal dynamics, not against them. Construction. Build structure that captures and retains heat passively. Food planning. Produce and preserve food on annual cycle. Energy management. Minimize fuel needs through design, not just burning more wood. Community structure. Enforce resource sharing through law and custom. This is engineering thinking, systems thinking, not toughness thinking. Modern test proves this. The 2011-2012 Danish reconstruction experiment. Participants weren't selected for toughness, average modern people, but they survived 15 weeks in reconstructed Viking houses. How? The houses worked. The systems worked. Temperature stayed livable. Ventilation prevented carbon monoxide poisoning. Food storage kept supplies fresh. None of this required toughness. It required correct application of established techniques. The toughness myth is dangerous. It suggests survival is about personal qualities. If someone dies, they weren't tough enough. This is wrong. If someone dies, the system failed. Fix the system. Vikings didn't survive because they were tougher than you. They survived because they built better systems than you have. If modern persons suddenly transported to Viking conditions without Viking knowledge, they die quickly. Not because they're weak, because they don't know the systems. Similarly, Viking transported to modern city without modern knowledge would struggle. Not because they're primitive, because the systems are different. Survival is about matching technique to conditions. Vikings matched techniques to Scandinavian winter conditions through centuries of experimentation and knowledge transmission. That's why they survived. Not because they were superhuman. Because they were smart engineers working within a functioning culture. 10 myths destroyed. What's left? Reality. Vikings weren't superhuman, cold-resistant warriors. They were intelligent farmers and engineers who solved complex survival problems through observation, experimentation, and cultural knowledge transmission. They didn't eat only meat. They ate balanced diet heavy in fish and grains. They didn't drink constantly. They drank weak ale as liquid food. They didn't love cold. They feared it and built systems to survive it. Their houses weren't primitive. They were sophisticated thermal engineering. They didn't fight nature. They cooperated with natural systems. The archaeological evidence is clear. Chemical analysis of bones, isotope studies, midden excavations, structural analysis of ruins, modern reconstruction experiments, all point to same conclusion. Viking winter survival was technical achievement, not result of superior toughness. This matters because myths obscure lessons. The toughness myth suggests you can't apply Viking techniques unless you're Viking tough. False. The techniques work regardless of user toughness. The engineering principles are universal. Modern society could benefit from Viking approach. Passive thermal design, fermented food preservation, community resilience structures, seasonal adaptation. These aren't romantic historical curiosities. They're practical solutions to universal problems.
Climate change is making weather more extreme. Energy is becoming more expensive. Supply chains are fragile. Community bonds are weak. All problems Vikings faced. All problems they solved. Their solutions are documented. We can learn from them. But only if we see past the myths. Only if we stop thinking of Vikings as superhuman warriors and start seeing them as engineers, nutritionists, architects, community organizers, people who solved problems using available resources and transmitted knowledge through generations. The greatest Viking survival technique? Teaching children, passing knowledge, building cultural memory. That's why Viking techniques lasted 1,000 years, not because individuals were tough, because culture preserved and transmitted solutions. Subscribe to Brave Viking Stories because we show you the reality, not the myths, not the movies, the archaeology, the chemistry, the engineering, the actual techniques that worked. Next week, why did Vikings deliberately heat rocks to near melting point and put them in their beds? Modern science explains the thermal dynamics, and yes, it's more interesting than it sounds. Subscribe to Brave Viking Stories, where myths go to die and knowledge survives.